hopefully get a few more people and just let them in as they show up. Well, welcome everybody. Certainly a good day to, whoops, back to, there we go. Certainly a good day to be inside. Hopefully your gardens are all surviving and you're able to get enough water on them to get through this heat spell. As luck would have it, next week, let me mention that because I often forget, Deb Sorrell will talk about, who's a YOLO Master Gardener, will talk about climate-ready plants. So plants that are already adapted to sort of the increasing temperatures we're seeing in the Sacramento Valley. And Deb's a very good presenter. So come and learn about the plants that you may want to transition into as things heat up. It certainly seems to be an important topic, especially for what we're seeing now. So yeah, put that on your calendars. That's July 25th, 2 Thursdays from now. Okay, but today we're going to talk about berries. Whether you have berries, maybe we'll talk about some things you can do for berry care. If you're thinking about planting berries, most of them are bare root, but something that you can plan for in the future. But first, which of these do botanists classify as berries? Well, berries have to have a skin. They have to come from a single ovary. They have to have seeds inside, and then they have to have a gelatinous mixture inside, if you will, some sort of a gelatinous mixture. So believe it or not, bananas are berries, according to botanists. And so are tomatoes, but strawberries and blackberries aren't. But we will talk about what we typically call berries. So strawberries and the brambles, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, certainly my favorite, and some of the less usual ones. We'll start with some general care tips. So actually, Bonnie Berman and I did not exactly this talk, did a talk on berries probably 3 years ago. So maybe some people saw that. But we did two sessions. This is going to be, there we go. This is going to be some new material, but shorter. Okay, I hope. So berries are actually a very diverse group, and especially the things we call berries. As you know, some of them aren't even berries, but most of them want fertile, well-drained soil. Well, what plant doesn't? With lots of organic matter. So what do you add? I'm sure everybody knows compost, compost, compost. If you're preparing a bed for berries, the more compost, the better. And most prefer soil in the acidic direction, if you will, something below 7. Some want really good drainage like strawberries, and some want highly acidic soil like blueberries. So they're not all the same, but they all have, sort of similar tendencies. Most want a lot of sun, but in our area, afternoon shade can actually be a benefit, and it's at least okay. I have blueberries that get afternoon shade, and they're doing just fine. I will talk about those. But they also want consistent soil moisture. So, mulch, mulch, mulch. That's good advice for pretty much everything these days, be it ornamentals or berries or your vegetable garden. But mulching is definitely a plus. Okay. If you have any questions, put them in chat and SB will read them. I'm assuming there are no questions yet, but I will pause at a time or two as we go along. All right, blueberries. For lots of reasons, frankly, these are my favorites. They are beautiful plants. The flowers, they're pretty when they're flowering. Blueberry clusters are pretty. You get fall colors. So it's really a nice plant. I keep going too far. All right. So yeah, pretty flowers in the spring. And actually, they're easiest grown in pots in our area. I'll give you the alternatives, but you'll see why. It's certainly my recommendation to grow blueberries in pots. But you can grow them in the soil. Um, Generally what we would plant here is called southern high bush. If you go to a good nursery, they're not going to sell you a plant that isn't going to do well here. But most of them are the southern high bush varieties. Um, they generally want full sun. Um, Again, some afternoon shade is best. The southern high bush varieties need less freeze time. So they do need some freeze time, but they need less than like the northern varieties. So that's why they work better here. But the real key to success for blueberries is acidic soils. If you put blueberries into our native soils, which are a pH of 7, that means they're neutral or close to neutral, or even a little higher than that, which means they're basic, they will not do well. They may not die, but they're not going to thrive. They probably won't even fruit for you. So, so creating acidic soils is really the key to being successful with blueberries. Otherwise, they're pretty tough. They're relatively drought tolerant. They'll do better with more water, and I'll talk about that. But they're they need acidic soils. So they want soils that have a pH of 4.5 to 5.5. That's way down the acidic range. That's much lower again than our soils, which are generally around 7 or above. And just to give you an idea, pH is a logarithmic scale. So a 6 is 10 times more acidic than 7, and a 5 is 100 times more acidic than 7. So if you want to grow blueberries in the ground, you need to add some sort of acidifying amendment. And generally, you need to add that a year before planting, because what you add has to get worked on by the soil bacteria. It's our friends, the soil bacteria, but needs to get worked on in order to create sulfuric acid. And it takes them some time to do that. So it will take some planning if you want to grow them in the ground. You want to grow more than a few that you may be able to easily grow in pots. But they grow blueberries now down by Bakersfield. They probably have more basic soil than we do, and it's hotter and sunnier. And there are commercial blueberry palm orchards. I don't know. Yeah, probably commercial blueberry orchards down near Bakersfield. So it can be done. The best tool I found for that is this Clemson soil acidifier. It's a calculator. Just plug your specifics in the data that you have, and it will tell you how much acidifier, if you will, which is the easiest thing to add is sulfur. You can go to the nursery and buy what they call sulfur pearls, but it's just sulfur not powdered in kind of granules. So I plugged it in. I said we have loamy soil. We have clay loam. You may want to look at that. They didn't have that as an option. I said beginning of pH 7, and the target was 5.5. I have to get there. Okay. And what it said was for every 10 feet, you have to add a third of a pound, basically, of elemental sulfur. Tells you how to do it, but they recommend doing it in 5 applications. So small applications to gradually increase or reduce the pH, and then you can check them. They tell you how to do it. But as you can see, it's a bit of a process. But if you do plant in the soil, you want, a lot of plants, a whole row of blueberries. You want to make some raised mounds that are 8 to 8 inches high. You can make those largely adding compost. to the soil, or compost, maybe a compost soil mixture. Mounds 3 to 4 feet wide, and you want to do that so that they have good drainage. Again, blueberries don't want to have water standing around the base of the blueberry. You want good drainage. Or you can do them in pots. Now, 25-gallon size pots work well. You know, if you want them to look good, the wine barrels are a good choice. More expensive than some of the other options, but certainly attractive. One easy way to do it is plant them in a 50-50 potting soil peat moss mix, and then you add perlite or bark nuggets for drainage. But that gives you a soil that's pretty much in the right range. Now, if you don't want to use peat moss, and I know it's sort of a mined product, even though the Canadians tell us that it's sustainable, you can use high acidic potting soil, but it probably has peat moss in it too. That's recommended, you know, for rhododendrons and azaleas. It probably has a pH of around 6. Most of those products do. You can add some perlite and bulk bark nuggets to that, and then you would probably need to lower that a little bit more with the sulfur pearls. But you can probably plant your plants into a pH of 6. If you use the alternative of coir, which is coconut husks, essentially, that a lot of people use as an alternative to peat moss, but it has a pH of 7, essentially. So then you've got to go through a process of acidifying that. So again, if you want to start quick, peat moss is really the most practical way to go. Variety selection, it's a good idea to grow several cultivars that range in ripening times. And even the self-fruitful cultivars will do better if they have some cross-pollination from other cultivars. Again, I mentioned Southern High Bush is the type that we grow here generally. And some good options are O'Neill. There's a picture of O'Neill right there. Misty, Sharp Blue, Blue Crop, Southern Moon, Jubilee. Now, Jubilee is actually a northern high bush, and I have one, and they're a much smaller berry, much more what you'd think of as from a northern blueberry, but they are much stronger flavored than the others. And so I think they're a nice thing to fit in. I mean, it takes longer to pick them. They're smaller, but they are delicious, and I would definitely recommend that. I have O'Neill and Misty and South Moon and Jubilee and 2 other varieties that I can't think of right now. But I did pick them so that they're early, middle, and late ripening. Okay. Again, they want consistent soil moisture. You can use either mini sprinklers or you can use a drip. They don't want the soil to be soggy. They are subject to some fungal diseases like I talked through. You can aim for like 1 to 2 inches of water a week. And the roots they're very shallow rooted. And the roots don't extend far beyond the crown. So again, you want to concentrate the water within the crown or maybe out to the drip line. You don't have to go beyond that like you would with a fruit tree. And usually you want to water them 1 to 3 times per week. So break that 1 to 2 inches into 1 to 3 times. And you can use, drip hose, you just circle the bush as you would a fruit tree. Pruning, if you have blueberries, so you'll need to prune them, probably not the first year if you just buy bare root, they're generally sold bare root. And you should remove the blossoms the first 2 to 3 years. This says 3. I've heard people say 2, but for the least 2 years, probably 3, you want to have the plant not have any berries. You prune them during the winter. It's not hard. You want to remove dead and dying spindly branches. you want to remove canes that are coming up, especially those are spindly from the middle. You want to try for 6 to 8 strong canes for every plant. So this gives an idea of what it would look like after pruning. So if you remove 1 to 2 each year, then you'll get strong canes coming up. But you do not want to head cut the blueberries back. So if you see here, this plant is essentially as tall as that plant. They didn't head it back. And that's because blueberries form on the end of the branches. And I misread one time way back when I was starting to grow them, and I thought it said to remove 1/3 of the canes. I thought it meant to cut back by 1/3, and I had no blueberries that year. So a word to the wise, don't head them back, because that's where the berries are going to form, is at the end. Okay, pests and weeds, definitely control weeds. You can do that with mulch. One of the great things about blueberries is they are pretty bulletproof. There are few insect pests. Phytophthora can be a problem in poorly drained soils or if they're over irrigated, so watch out for that. So it's really kind of a balance of keeping them moist throughout the growing season, but not too moist. And birds, of course, can be a problem. I let the blue jays have a few, and I've had plenty. I mean, we picked quarts and quarts of blueberries this year. It was a great blueberry year. So this is mine. I just have 6. They're in half poly barrels. They're about 6 feet high in the barrel. So one of the things about barrels is you can put them a lot closer together. They're not going to get as big as they do, in the ground, if they're growing well, but they're plenty big and they produce plenty berries. For harvesting, they don't all ripen at the same time, which is why we pay what we pay for blueberries, because they're pretty much still hand-picked. But if you let the clusters get so that at least half of them are blue, then those berries are going to be ripe. But the taste test is the best, because a lot of times they'll look blue and they'll be fine, but they're not going to be at the peak of flavor, and they will hang on a long time on the bush, a lot longer than other berries. So you don't need to rush to pick them, although I always do because I love them. So anyhow, I'm going to give a shout out for blueberries. Any questions? SB, any questions in chat? Okay,
No, not at this time.
Okay, all right, we're going to move on then. All right, strawberries. Some people say everybody should grow strawberries just because they're easy and delicious. And that's true. They are a bit fussy. I don't think they really like our hot weather, but they but certainly there are commercial strawberries grown here. Although we don't necessarily want to need to grow them the way the commercial guys do, because a lot of time they're still adding methyl bromide to the soil, and that's nasty stuff. That's probably the only crop they can still add that to in California. If you buy organic strawberries, they haven't, but then they have to work a little harder. At any rate, there are really 2 main categories: June bearing, which sometimes are called short day, and they have a large crop in the spring. And you can get early season, mid-season, late season, but they're not going to be fruiting. Even the quote unquote late season ones are not going to be fruiting into summer. And they say June bearing, but here, we're May, maybe a little bit into June. And then they're ever bearing. And these will fruit twice. They'll fruit in the spring, and again, they'll fruit in the late summer and fall. They have fewer runners, but definitely probably a better choice in many respects if you want more production out of the same amount of area. Again, go to a good nursery, look online for cultivars you want, try to pick ones that, again, if you go to a good nursery, they'll tell you what works well here. But and there's all kinds of different categories if you're looking for, flavor, size, you know, you just have to do a little research. There are a lot of strawberry cultivars, and more coming out all the time. Growth, they definitely want 6 hours of sun, but again, in our climate, some afternoon shade is not a bad thing. Technically, they say to grow them in rows that are 4 feet apart. You can put them closer than that. You know, you don't really need a 4-foot row between them, especially in a backyard garden where space is at a premium. And before I forget, you can grow strawberries in pots, obviously, very easily. Don't need to acidify the soil, just potting soil. The kind that are trailing will hang over. Very pretty in a pot. So you want to put, but if you're planting them in a row, about 18 inches between the plants, or you can put them on a hill, and you can do that like a single hill with 2 or 3 hills, maybe in a cluster of 3, a triangle, couple of feet apart. Drip irrigation definitely is best for strawberries, couple times a week. Obviously, they were for years irrigated with furrows. That's more of a commercial approach for us. Backyard gardeners definitely put in drip, so you control the amount of water. You know how much water they're getting. Lots of options for how to grow them. I mean, you can grow them in towers. One of the problems with this, though, is this dries out really fast. The traditional strawberry, these traditional strawberry pots, I guess, they do dry out fast. And some of the times it's just too hot in these. But if you have a good spot that gets, some afternoon shade, you can grow them in these kind of strawberry pots, certainly. But anyhow, lots of options for strawberries, very adaptable. Oops. So there's a couple things approaches you can take. One is they are short-lived perennials, so they're not going to live beyond 2 or 3 years. And again, most of the commercial guys rip them out every year. So the good news is you'll probably get, you will get strawberries your first year. That's one of the pluses. Or if you have runners, they'll all put out daughter plants, some more than others. But if you want to, you can cut those up, or let them root. Actually, you can just like safety pin them down to the ground. Not safety pin. Get some sort of a wire and bend it so that it's, you can just like hold them down into the ground and they will root. And then you can pull those up. And as this says, you can dig them up in October, pull off most of the leaves. You want to give them a little cold chill for a few days, and then you can plant them out into a new bed. And that way you can, save the cost. This just gives you an idea. You don't want to plant them too high or too low. You want to plant them, just at the same height that essentially they were growing. But that saves you the cost of buying new plants. So plant care, you want to pinch off the runners. If you encourage larger plants, they're gonna, the new daughter plants aren't going to fruit probably. So you're not going to be increasing the amount of fruit you get by letting the daughters grow. But again, if you want to do your own and multiply your own, that's you let some of those go. And for ever-bearing plants, the recommendation is for the first couple of times to cut off flower clusters. But again, you still should get more. You still should get fruit in the first year. And if they're the June bearing ones, they recommend taking off leaves late in the fall. That's to keep them from dying and holding too much water in near the crown. And best recommendation is to remove dead leaves weekly to, again, keep too much dense dead material from being right around the crown, which can increase, too much moisture held there. So that's, just some care for strawberries. Any questions, SB?
Not at this time.
Okay, we're moving along. We're doing on time. No, pretty good. Okay. All right. This is another really good thing to grow is brambles or caneberries, blackberries, raspberries, and the like. Raspberries are hard here, I will say right off the bat, just because it's too hot. There are a few varieties that reportedly do better in the heat, but they are going to be much fussier than most of the blackberries. So just take that as some advice, but if you want to go for it, good. They want well-drained soils. Most plants do. High in organic matter. Most plants want that too. With, again, a pretty low pH. So when you're preparing the beds, you want to work to reduce the pH. You can do it by working potting soil in or peat moss in. You can use the sulfur nuggets. Now, they're not as sensitive as blueberries. I think it's probably a good idea, certainly to reduce the pH. You'll have healthier plants, but I've been successful here planting blackberries right in the soil and lowering the pH as it goes along. So they won't die, and they probably will, do okay in our native soil. But again, you can add the sulfur or peat moss if you're adding sulfur. 1 to 2 pounds per 100 square feet will bring a pH from 7 to 6. So again, that calculator from Clemson is a great place to look and figure that out. They also like, a lot of organic matter. So composted manures, compost when you're building the bed, and that work will be well rewarded. All right. Beds, again, you want to plant them on a mound. They want good drainage, 4 feet wide, 8 to 10 inches high. And this is 8 to 10 feet apart. Now, if you have 2 rows, you really don't need them that far apart. This is what the commercial guys would do. Certainly can be closer for raspberries. But they are big plants, and they will spread, 3-4 feet. So if you got them spreading 3-4 feet on both sides, you can see, and you want to be able to, easily get through there. You do need to leave, I think at least 6 feet probably, and that may be a little tight, depending on how you trellis them, but we'll talk about that. And there are both varieties that need to be trellised that you can control a little better. Than there are freestanding varieties that get wider. Now you can certainly prune them back, but so depending on the type of berry you're planting, it may dictate how far apart you put them. Okay, so this to me looks like the trellising was not very well managed, but so it is. Now these are my berries, and I got to the point where I wanted to plant berries and really had nowhere else to put them but against a west-facing fence. That was stupid, but they do work. They're getting too much sun. I'll talk about what the results of that are. Too much heat, I guess, is really the thing. I mean, they're in full sun pretty much the full day. And it's hard, I've got berries on this backside here that I have to reach through to get to. So it is not best. But again, we get quarts and quarts and quarts of berries off of these berries, so I can't complain. But I would avoid doing it this way if you at all can. But it does safe space. So if you're in a tight space and you have to do it this way, it will work. I'm here to tell you, but that's not the best. Okay, if you buy them, you're going to buy them bare root. You're going to be planting them, in the winter sometime. You want to plant the berries 2 to 4 feet apart in the rows. Trim the canes then to about 6 inches, and then sit back because you're not going to get any berries the first year. And I will explain why that is. Oh, in a minute. But first, again, there are two types of basically two divisions again. You have those that are considered trailing, and you're going to need to have some sort of trellising for them. Or there are these new, relatively new, well, I don't know, probably 20, 30 years or something, but self-supporting cultivars. So you can just plant one. And it doesn't need to be trellised. They have very thick stems. They will arch out a lot farther than this picture shows ultimately. The other nice thing about, I think, all of the self-supporting ones is they don't have thorns. So some advantages there. But so that's the two options. And this, this can be a landscape plant. I mean, they are really pretty enough that they have nice flowers and berries, and they're just a fairly pretty plant if you want to use them, as part of edible landscaping. But if you do the trailing cultivars, which is the classic, they really need to have trellising of some sort. So there are a lot of options. I just say, do some research how you want to do it. You can trellis them in ways that are going to, make them a little more compact. But you do need to build trellises. But hopefully, well, if there are used materials, doesn't need to be fancy. I use bed frames, and if you look, you'll find there are thousands of bed frames thrown away every year in this city, and dumpsters in Davis at least, and probably in Solano County and Woodland, and they're a metal post, and you can pound them into the ground. Then you can get some wire, maybe you can salvage some pipe, which I was able to do for cross pieces, and you can build your trellising for very little money. But again, you're going to have them for years and years and years. So if you do have to end up, buying materials, you're going to amortize that over, a decade or two. So it's not so bad. Blackberries need balanced fertilizer. If you're applying organic fertilizers, you apply in the early winter, again, because the soil bacteria have to work on, it's a good tip for all organic fertilizers, for the most part. And because the soil bacteria have to work on the materials in organic fertilizers to turn them into material that the plants can use. If you're using commercial inorganic fertilizers, then apply early in the spring at bud break, and probably maybe an application even earlier than that. I'm sorry, I was thinking blossoming. No, this is bud break. So when the plants are coming out, when they're starting to leaf out, that's when you want to apply that in the spring. Now, mine did not lose leaves this year. It was just too warm. So be aware that sometimes in our warming climate, your blackberries may not lose their leaves, but early in the spring. Irrigation, again, they want 1 to 2 inches of water each week. And if you can add more in extremely hot or windy weather, absolutely do it. I have added another half to the berry water I was giving my berries in the last week, and then in that earlier hot session we had. Generally, you want to irrigate them 2 times a week, maybe 3 on a hot weather, and especially when the fruit is maturing, because if they're not going to get enough water, they don't get enough water with the maturing fruit, the fruit's going to dry up. And I'll show you a couple of pictures of what can happen. So they do need regular irrigation, especially when the fruit is maturing. So they have a 2-year growth and fruiting cycle. So this is the reason you're not getting any berries the first year. The first year, the canes are primocanes, and those primocanes will not fruit. So they'll just come out and grow. They won't blossom and they won't fruit. The second year, those primocanes become floricanes, and that year they will fruit, and then they die, either in the hot summer or at least by winter. So you're going to have to cut them out. So there is some maintenance here. It's a bit of work. You can't just let them go um, if you want them to do well. Um, so so just be prepared. No fruit the first year, fruit the second year and thereafter, because you're always going to have a primocane or primocanes turning into floricanes and flowering and fruiting for you. But you just have to be aware of that, and you have to, when you're pruning out the primocanes or the floricanes, you want to make sure you're not cutting out any of the primocanes. Okay, so here's what happens. In the winter, you would cut the primocanes back, depending on what kind of trellising you have. And then they will grow more side branches. But at any rate, you probably want to prune back the primocanes because some of the cultivars, they're 12, 13, 14 feet long. They don't need to be that long. You can cut them back, trellis them, and then they'll put out side branches that will then leaf out and flower and fruit that year. And then the last year's floricanes, you cut them right at the ground. So again, in the summer, as they begin to branch out, you can do this, cut them back like this, and you'll get more branches. You'll get a better plant in many respects. So this is what you do early in the summer. Pests and diseases, birds obviously might be a problem. Bird netting does work. Mulch, mulch, mulch to control weeds and to even out the watering. Preserve the water, keep the soil moisture consistent. They have very, very shallow roots. So even shallow cultivation can harm the roots. They're generally right up near the surface. And then soil fungal diseases can be encouraged again. So you don't want to overwater, but certainly they need enough water. Rust, which is a fungal disease, can be a problem. There's a yellow rust that will get on the fruiting canes. I have this on mine. It's just there. I haven't been able to get rid of it. I spray with sulfur, and that slows it down. Oh, I don't have yellow rust. I have the orange rust here. Sorry, I misspoke. So the yellow rust shows up on the leaves. The orange rust shows up here. The yellow rust will kill the plant eventually. So if that shows up in your plants, you want to just pull them out. Again, the orange rust, you can. I have to back up again. All right, let me start again on this. All right, so yellow rust appears on the fruiting canes. I could just read this. I would be doing a lot better. And you can apply copper and or sulfur and basically control it. The orange rust is on the leaves, on the underside of the leaves, and it is necessary if you get this to pull out the infected plants because it's just going to spread to others, and there really isn't any way to control it. This on the canes can be controlled with sulfur or copper. So it's a problem, but you don't need to pull them out. Okay, cultivars. Again, you want to plant those with a range of ripening, early, middle, late. There are thorny or thornless for both the trailing and the self-supporting. But I think all the self-supporting ones I've seen are thornless, but maybe there is a cultivar or two that has thorns. But definitely there are some, there are thorns and thornless for the type that you need to trellis up. So for the trailing, there are loganberries are very, very flavorful. Blackberry, raspberry mix, sylvan, boysenberries are very popular. Catota marionberries are also very popular. And Olala, and then Tayberry is another blackberry raspberry cross. The self-supporting ones you can have, there's Cheyenne, Black Satin, Shawnee. A lot of these ended up with Native American names. I don't know how that happened. Tribal names, Cherokee, Darrow, Hull, and Chester, Triple Crown, and Arapaho and Natchez. A lot of these are very late to very late to ripen. And that is a problem in our area, and I'll show you. But these two, Arapaho and Natchez, apparently ripen early. And you may not find them locally. You may have to go to an online nursery, but I would definitely check them out. Because here's what happens. This is Dirksen, and they will burn. And these are mine, and this is what I have to do is put shade cloth over them. And otherwise, you just end up with crispy berries because they're not ripening until now, and they just can't stand the direct sun and the heat. It doesn't matter how much water you put on them; they're not gonna be edible. But if you put shade cloth over them, it does seem to work okay. They are thornless. They're very productive. They're beautiful. And here's Chester. This is what a lot of the self-supporting berries look like. But this is what happens if they're not covered by shade cloth. You can see in this picture, these berries are just fried. So these, I mean, these are my yard. These that were outside of the shade cloth, just fried. So just be prepared. And so the earlier ripening in our climate, certainly the better. Okay, raspberries. What are we doing? Pretty good. Okay. It really is just generally too hot in the valley to grow raspberries very easily. The soil preparation and planting is the same. If you really want to grow them, raspberries will spread out from a center. They don't really need to be trellised because they're direct canes, but to keep from falling over, you want to generally put a wire on each side to kind of hold them up together. If you're lucky, maybe you can put them in a spot that gets regular shade from noon on. Certainly, they have to be irrigated regularly, probably more than most of the blackberries. But again, 1 to 2 inches a week. I had raspberries when we lived up in the foothills. It was still hot, maybe not as hot as here. And I had them planted so that they got shade every afternoon from these live oaks that were just to the west of them. So they were tall, the live oaks were tall, so the shade started early. And they did okay, but I think otherwise here it's just, it's hard. But if you want to do it, again, they spread out from the central crown. They will keep spreading, unlike blackberries. So you just need to either shovel prune them back or pull them out. And again, the trellising isn't really to hold them up. It's just, it's not trellising the way blackberries are. You just really need 1 or 2 wires on either side of them, and they'll just grow up just so they don't fall over. Now there are two types. Well, there's obviously more cultivars than that, but two main categories. Again, there's summer and fall raspberries. Summer raspberries are grown like blackberries. So you prune out the floricanes after fruiting and tip back the primocanes. Fall raspberries often two options. Okay, they will ripen in the fall. Well, late summer probably is more like it. The heat, sun. But there are two options. All of the canes in fall raspberries are primocanes, so they will fruit each year in late summer, fall. So you can just cut them all down and let them come back, and they will fruit again in the late fall. Or, and this is a way to increase your production, you can cut them back by half. And those old canes will fruit again the following spring. And then new canes that come up will fruit in the fall. Now you're going to get a smaller crop each time than like your fall crop is going to be smaller than it would have otherwise been, but you do get berries 2 times a year. And in either case, you want to thin the primocanes to 6 to 12 per plant. So again, they're going to keep coming up and spreading. You want to 6 to 12 is good. This is fall gold, which is the variety that I had the best luck with. I'm not growing raspberries here, but I was in the foothills. And this is delicious. But there are also some red varieties for fall. And I had the best luck with the fall berries up there rather than the summer berries. So, do some research and look around if you want to grow them. Again, weeds are always a problem. Raspberries are susceptible to some soil fungus. So again, we don't want to leave the soil soggy. Here's Phytophthora root rot. Raspberries are susceptible to the yellow rust. The orange rust doesn't seem to be a problem. So I guess that's good news. And again, try to research those that say they tolerate heat best. When I looked, there's Sumner, which is a summer-bearing red raspberry, Tulamine, which is a summer-bearing red raspberry also. Heritage is a fall-bearing red raspberry, Bababerry, fall-bearing red raspberry, and then the Fall Gold, which is a fall-bearing yellow raspberry. Yeah, so definitely a challenge if you have the right spot. If you love raspberries or just want to be up to a challenge, definitely give them a try. I mean, raspberries are delicious. So if you can do it, great. That would be great. Okay, any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Patty Clark says, thanks for all this info. Can thornless type blackberry turn into a thorny one?
Can what? Can a thornless? No. There are thorny cultivars and thornless cultivars. So if you plant a thornless cultivar, it is not going to get thorny. At least I've never heard of such a thing happening. And the reverse is true too. If you plant a thorny cultivar, now these don't have the thorns. Most of the commercial cultivars do not have thorns like what we call the wild blackberry, which is a Himalaya berry, which was actually imported by Luther Burbank, by the way. Came from the same area as apples, the Caucasus. And he was looking at using them for breeding, but they escaped, and now they're everywhere. But if you want a plant that takes care of itself and does produce berries every year and actually tastes pretty good, there's something to be said for Himalaya berries, but they're very invasive and they do have, 6-inch thorns on them, it seems like. The cultivars you would buy at a nursery, they have thorns, but they're not that big. Okay. But they are not going to also turn into a thornless cultivar. So yeah, one or the other. Okay. Any others?
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right. Again, how are we doing? Okay, well, I'm not sure I'll get to the end, but we will. Let's talk about some less usual ones. Like those that we just talked about are the ones that everybody knows about and wants to grow. There are a lot of other berry-bearing plants um, that you might want to think about. So here's a list. I mean, all of these are worth a thought. And I'll talk about some of them. So a serviceberry in particular, or Juneberry or shadbush, serviceberries, one cultivar or another, probably one variety or other, because they are a wild berry. They started out that way, grow in every state of the union. So they are widely distributed, and anything that's that widely distributed is pretty tough. So, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful, big bushes, beautiful flowers, very tasty berries. So definitely something to think about. Okay, this is another one, alpine strawberries. Some people call these wild strawberries. They're not exactly. We have now, cultivars of alpine strawberries. Um, these multiply by seed, though. Normally, we don't use runners. All you have to do is just, so they're, just let them dry let one or two dry, crush them up and scatter them around, and they will grow new alpine strawberries. They're small. They're not the flavor that you expect from, a commercial strawberry. Not quite that sweet, but very interesting flavor. And they're a beautiful ground cover. And I think they're a lot less trouble really than regular strawberries. I mean, they just seem pretty bulletproof. Um, so um, they're definitely something worth looking at if you want an alternative to standard strawberries. Um, they're all everbearing, which means they're going to bear throughout the year. And there are a number that are available. They may not be available locally, but certainly they're available from online nurseries. This is one I started talking about, service berries. This is a big bush. 15 could be 25 feet high. Probably shorter in our area just because of the heat and whatnot. They're in the same family as apples and pears. They bloom early, beautiful. I think I have a picture later of service berries in bloom, but beautiful white or pink flowers depending on the cultivar. They're fairly drought tolerant. Again, good drainage. Who doesn't want that? They want sun. If you can give them some afternoon shade, they're going to be happier. But they're a very good landscape or hedgerow plant. They attract wildlife. There's the Saskatoon. You may have even heard of them called Saskatoon berries. That variety seems to be best adapted to the Sacramento Valley. But again, you may be able to get them through certainly you can get them online. You may be able to get them through a local nursery, or maybe they can order them for you. Currants are a little fussy. They don't like hot weather. So again, absolutely, if you want to try to grow currants or gooseberries, their cousin, you want to give them absolute shade from noon on. A lot of different varieties. Again, they want to be consistently moist. Very pretty plants. Very pretty clusters of berries. You don't even have to eat them to appreciate them. And a lot of currants are not that sweet. That's why a lot of times you'll see them dried. But they can grow in rows or containers. So again, you want something different to grow. You may want to look into currants. Again, afternoon shade. There are some that are very tall, 10, 15 feet tall. Shorter varieties or cultivars are probably better. There are a lot of different ones. You want to make sure you can retain some soil moisture. But you want to let the berries fully ripen on the plants. I mean, they are not, a lot of the cultivars, again, they're not that sweet. So you want to let them fully ripen. And they do have some problems. So they're susceptible to aphid, spider mites, and powdery mildew. But so are a lot of the other plants that we grow. So, nothing new there. They fruit best on 2 to 3 year old wood. So you are going to have to do some pruning. You can't just let them run wild. Pretty much like blueberries. They're not blueberries. They're not even related to blueberries, but you want to remove the oldest canes, and after 2 or 3 years, take out the ones in the middle. So here's some before and after pruning. Okay, huckleberries. I don't know how many of you, these are what I grew up on the North Coast, and huckleberries grew wild in the woods. So you can still grow them here. These are related to blueberries. Some people would call them wild blueberries. In fact, they're I think the same species. Yeah, that's what that says. I must have written that down from somebody who knew what they're talking about. Certainly the same genus. They're much smaller berries, much stronger flavored, and you can eat them. Huckleberry pie is delicious. So I would definitely think you may want to think about huckleberries as an option, even to blueberries if you want to grow them. So these are, yeah, again, a very pretty shrub. Nice flowers, berries hanging on the plant are beautiful. So they don't grow in clusters, or at least not as big clusters the way blueberries do. Definitely worth considering. Aronia berries, you may have heard about these. They were a big thing for a while, and I don't know, maybe they still are, because they're very, very high in antioxidants. This is one that you will not need to acidify the soil for. In fact, they like alkaline soils. They're very pretty. I grew these when we lived in the foothills. Bulletproof, no pests, no disease, but they are not sweet. Okay, so a lot of times you'll find these dried again, but so you add a sweetener, you can cook them. So just another interesting berry, but don't expect to eat them right off the bush and think that they're beautiful, that they're that tasty. Goji berries, another one that was, these are from uh, Western China. And another berry that is very, very high in antioxidants. Generally, you find them dried. And part of the reason is these berries are sweet, but the flavor is not very complex, let's put it that way. But they're not bad. And so a lot of health benefits, high in antioxidants. And this is mistaken. They benefit from afternoon shade in the hottest months. But you can look slightly alkaline soil, 7 to 7.5. So, we're good. And very drought tolerant. Again, no diseases that I know of, no problems, very easy to grow. And they're pretty. They're a pretty plant. So you could grow these as, a landscape plant and have the benefit of some berries. And if you want to leave the berries for the birds, all the better. Birds love them. Gumi, or autumn olive, is another name for this. This is actually a legume, so they will fix some nitrogen. They're not real sweet either, but you can eat them fresh. I mean, they're not like aronia berries. So definitely edible, edible, sweet, and fresh. They probably want 2 varieties, but again, no pests or diseases. These have been considered to be invasive in some areas, so you just have to watch them. I mean, they will drop. If they drop, they definitely, a lot of them will sprout. So you just have to be prepared for that. But they're very pretty white flowers. I grew these once, so definitely interesting. And then they're related, confused, they're somewhat different. Some people call gumi autumn olive. They're actually two different plants. But these again are small, almost, you could probably prune them into a small tree. And again, these also are considered invasive in some eastern and midwestern states. I don't think it's been a big problem here. But you would have to watch them if you planted them, that you don't get them sprouting up in your neighbor's yard. Another one you might want to think about are elderberries. These are a beautiful landscape tree. Elderberries come in clusters. The blue elderberry is probably the most, much more flavorful than the wild elderberry that grows even around here or in the foothills. So very fragrant flowers. And as it says, they're mildly toxic when uncooked, although I've known people that have eaten them, But if you cook them, that toxicity goes away, and they're very nutritious. So elderberry pie is pretty good stuff. Okay. Mulberries, these are big trees. Some mulberries are big, big trees. Somewhat drought resistant, so 30-foot. And the other thing is, a lot of people grow fruitless mulberries because they are prone to staining. Like if you grow a mulberry bush over your cars or tree over your cars or your patio or driveway, if the fruit falls, it will stain. So just be aware of that. But lots of berries. Generally not a lot of problems. This is leaf-footed bugs, but and just like blackberries, not a berry, they're a collection of fruits. But something to think about if you want a big tree that produces tons of fruit. All right, and even Van Gogh had a mulberry tree picture. And we've kind of run out, so I'm going to just stop. Well, let me mention real quickly that a lot of these berry plants, as I said, are great as edible landscaping plants. I mean, they're very attractive bushes, most of them. So you certainly can do blueberries here, so that you can grow blueberries in a pot. The self-supporting blackberries, I think, are a good option. As I mentioned, okay, there's serviceberry, beautiful in the spring. Here's alpine strawberries used as a ground cover, or right in the front of the bed, in the rest of the landscape, not in its own berry patch. And here's a blackberry cultivar that is in a hanging pot. So sky's the limit. Lots of options. So, and I was going to mention they're in the same family, the Acacia family, same as roses. So, blackberry blossoms are short-lived, but they're very pretty when they're blooming. So you can certainly use them in edible landscaping, in amongst the rest of your landscaping plants. Oops. Okay. Any other questions, SB?
Yes. Could you please talk about sea berry?
Oh, well, I passed by that because we're running out of time, but all right, real quick. Where were they? What happened to it? Oh, there it is. There, okay. I've never grown these. They come recommended by a lot of people, very highly nutritious. I think they're tart, high in antioxidants. Another legume, and they're very tough, because I know, as this says, and I've seen people that did it up in the foothills, they were planted for erosion control. So good, tough plant, big, heavy root system. And they are thorny, but there are some cultivars that are less. So, but this is a pretty big shrub. And I've seen them growing. They're also very pretty when they're flowering. And they could take our heavy soils. So, okay. So I did talk about seaberry. Definitely worth researching if you're interested in them. And I think they're probably pretty adaptable to here. So could be successful. Any others?
No more questions.
Okay. All right. So yes, berries. Definitely something to think about, both in the edible part of your garden and or the edible landscaping part. Um, there's a lot there a lot of options, and many of them are not that much trouble, and they give us delicious fruit. So, okay, thanks for coming. I hope your gardens are all surviving the heat. Again, next session, which is July 25th, Deb Sorrell is going to talk about plants that are already adapted to the increasing heat that we're seeing in the valley. So unfortunately, it's something we all need to think about. All right. So thanks for attending, folks, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, SB.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Okay,
Okay,
bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.